Welcome back to to Queer in Theology. This is your host, gay pastor, Pastor Arthur, and we are on God is Still Speaking. And today we're going to do something. We're going to start with a story. One day I used to preach a lot when I was in campus, and after the preaching, there was a lady who was listening to me, and she came up, and actually I went to her because after preaching I liked kind of, interacting with people who could give me some time. And when I went to her, she didn't even give me any time. She just said, "You know what? Don't you know that God is everywhere?" I think she was pissed that I was preaching because I used to preach in the dining hall, and because it was a free place and guys used to come there and the air was very cool, it was so breezy, and I used to take advantage of the people seated there. And she came and told me that, God is everywhere. And I told her, yeah, you're exactly right. He is everywhere. And so when she said that, of course, I didn't give it thought that day, but it has never left my mind. It has never left my neurons. It's still in my neural my neural stores. And I've been thinking about it now, and she actually said a very God is still speaking. That was a God is still speaking moment. Of course, David has already said it, that when you go down to the valley and up into the highest mountain, God is still there. And so he was basically saying God is everywhere. So she was just summarizing David. But I've got it in a different way today, and that's what I want to focus on. God is everywhere. What does that mean? You can connect. And therefore, if she was not pissed against me, and she cannot go against me because she was seeing I was preaching in where there was no altar. There was no altar, physical altar, But because I was there preaching, she said, you know what, God is everywhere. So I think on the other angle, she was actually impressed with me and said, yeah, God is everywhere. You can preach anywhere you want. You can share the word of God anywhere. And that's what I've got to learn from this, that you can be with God anywhere. There's a very beautiful song sung by the late Ronald Winans, and also done by his brother Marvin Winans. I love it with all my heart, and I always sing it wherever I go out and I'm walking. And it says, wherever I go, let your spirit follow me. And I like it because it says, wherever I go, let your spirit follow me. But you can even say it differently and write a new song and say, your spirit is everywhere. It's even in Jupiter. It's even in Saturn. It's even in Cassiomedia. It's everywhere. Omnipresence is omnipresence. And this is what gave me courage when I came out as LGBTQ, because I came out as LGBTQ, of course I was still not happy with the church system, so I left the church system. And I wasn't happy with the way the church was run. Basically, I wasn't just happy with how it was run, and I saw that was a time when I was in the end-time movement. And I was there, and I sat there, and I came out, and I used to do my fellowship at home. I wouldn't go to church. I had the belief that the churches were apostate. But actually what it just means, the church is not saying what I want to hear. And the church is not following the Bible as I know it. So I wanted the church to do what the early church was doing. And it wasn't doing that. And they were doing their additional things. You know, their other traditions. You know, you can have a church that has the Catholic traditions, and you have Anglican traditions, and all of those things, and Presbyterian traditions. So I was against those traditions. And I remember I penned a letter to the one of the pastors, and I told him why I have to leave the church. I don't value their traditions. And so I came home, and I used to be reading the Word of God and doing things on my own. And then finally I became an atheist, because when I read the Bible, I just said, you know what? This thing doesn't make sense. God is not there, because I'm trying to call him, and he's not there. And the only thing, and then that's when I came out as LGBTQ. I came out as gay. And when I came out as gay, I said, you know what? I would be an atheist, because the church is so homophobic. They hate me. And this happens to gay people, LGBTQ people. They always feel persecuted because of the climate. You know, when somebody says what you are is bad, or we hate you for who you are, naturally, psychologically, your response is of weakness, fear, and sometimes you can even go through torture, mental torture, because now you feel so low. It affects you. If you are not psychologically strong, you can be finished. That's why suicide is high in LGBTQ persons. Not because they're LGBTQ, but because of the homophobia. You're taunted. It's like war. Do you know the Jews of Masada near Jerusalem killed themselves? Why did they kill themselves? Do you know why? They were caught between a rock and a hard place, because when the Roman Empire invaded Jerusalem AD 70, they destroyed it. And there were some Jews who went to Masada. Masada is a high cliff, some high mountain kind of cliff. And when they went there, they chose, should we be slaves in the Roman Empire, or we should commit suicide? They chose to commit suicide, so it was called the mass suicide of Masada. They all fell off the cliff, and they were all dead. And the Romans couldn't get slaves from them. So what is a lesson from that? The lesson is that when you are persecuted, sometimes you think of suicide. Sometimes. There are other people who accept to be enslaved by the master. And this has just happened in Uganda. There's this lesbian activist, and she, instead of staying in the cause fighting for lesbian rights as she has been doing, for gay rights as she has been doing, she decided to succumb to pressure. And she succumbed to pressure because it's like one of the Jews of Masada saying, you know what, I'm not going to fall off the cliff, or I'm not going to fight the Romans. What I'm going to do is just be a slave for the Romans and just work for them. And this is what has happened to this LGBTQ activist in Uganda. Of course, we cannot attack her. It's up to her. It's her own personal choice to do what she wants to do. If she wants to leave LGBTQ community. But but it's sad because she was part of family. I think what she needs to understand, wherever, and this is what we're preaching now, God is everywhere. Because God, she's going to find God even in the homophobic church. Do you know that? That's what God is everywhere means. God is everywhere. So, but when you go to a homophobic setting, is God there? Now that's the question. You know, every discussion you have, someone should always have question time. If you look at how Jesus used to preach, Jesus, in all the gospel, what I like about the gospel writings, they don't just give us the sermons of Jesus. They even give us the questions they ask Jesus. So if you have an audience that is not quick-witted, you'll speak and there are no questions asked. So please do not fear to ask us questions on this channel. Now, so now we finished the God is everywhere, and I've ended saying that God can be even in a homophobic church. And now the question is, because I also ask myself questions, and we also have a segment called Questions. Is God where there's hate? You see, that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Is God where there's hate? Because if God is where there's hate, some people don't want God. Yes. Some people will say, I don't want that God. If hate is there, I don't want him. But what you've got to understand, then the second question is a church homophobic because the pastor is homophobic? Or the pastor is just homophobic? You see, it's how you view things. You will call a church homophobic if a church sits down and says, this is our decision that we are going to institute homophobia. You know, and they write it, no gay should come to church. Yes, but guess what? Is that the statement? And the catchphrase, you know how you catch many churches? I'll teach you how to, you know, in Africa, especially, this is for the African Christian, LGBTQ Christians. They also go to churches that preach homophobia, and somehow it has affected their lifestyle. At least some of them. Because, you know, whenever you listen to, that's why it's very good for you to go to an LGBTQ church in Africa, so that you are encouraged not to hate yourself and not to destroy yourself, not to commit suicide, not to think that you're a bad person. God loves you. And these are the messages we're going to be throwing out now. But, I mean, what I mean by that, I mean spreading it. And, so what I'm trying to say, God is everywhere. What it means, God can invade a hateful space. Because God is love. God is not hate. You see, that's what the homophobes don't understand. They think God is hate. But God is love. And homophobes have a way of fighting. If they know you're gay, they fight you to the bitter end instead of loving you. and accepting and saying, I don't know who you are. I don't know how you feel, but I accept you. Do you know if they do that, they become like God? That's what Jesus said. Be perfect as my Father is perfect. Why? Because God, when God is perfect, He brings the sun and the rain for both the bad person and the good person. That's what Jesus said. That's a perfect person. A perfect person treats everybody the same. That's what Jesus is saying. That's what he's saying. Even the issue of saying good and bad, what does that mean? If you're going to give the sun to the good person, and the rain to the bad person, and the rain to the good person, and the sun to the bad person, what does that mean? They're all equal. They're all equal. And what's going to happen? When they die, they die. You know, good people die, bad people die. It's that simple. I mean, whatever your definition of good or bad is. Because for a homophobe, a homosexual is a bad person. But for a homosexual, a homophobe is a bad person. So who is right? You know what? God is going to give the sun and the rain to both of those people. He's going to bless them all. So what does this mean? Countries that oppress gay people, they oppress them. They are doing something by their own volition. It is not by God. Because Jesus has already said God blesses everyone. He gives the sun and the rain to everyone. That's how perfect God is. That's why there is nobody as good as God. That's what Jesus said. No one good but God. But He said, He encouraged you to be perfect like Him. He didn't force you and say, thou shalt be perfect. He said, be perfect like God. He leaves it there. And this is another thing we're going to study about Jesus, but this is the God is Still Speaking section, so we won't talk about that. Jesus was he was not like Moses. Moses was very legal. He was a lawyer. Moses was a lawyer. And that's what people don't know. The Pharisees were lawyers. They were the teachers of the law, the professors of the law. And laws, today we are so secularized, we forget to think that other countries existed with religious law. I mean, the Islamic world is run by religious law. Yes. There is no secular law in an Islamic state, in a full Islamic state. Absolutely none. They even have what you call Islamic jurisprudence. Meaning, if the judge has to be so well conversant with the Quran, not with American legal philosophers. No. He has to be very well conversant with the Quran and the Sharia law for him to come and decide a case for the Muslims. That's what you call Islamic jurisprudence. So, what does that tell you? Muhammad was also a lawyer. Any country, ancient country that had laws, Hammurabi was also a lawyer. He was a legislator. He made law. And so what is happening is, but Jesus was not a lawyer. But he was a lawyer, but he was a very liberal lawyer. Why? He gave his commands. He also gave his commandments. Yes, he did. He gave his commandments. Meaning he gave his laws. And some of his laws do actually contradict the laws of Moses. Moses said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Jesus said, if you're slapped on the right cheek, give the left cheek. That was the law of Jesus, which contradicts Moses. So who are you going to listen to? Some people love Moses. And if you follow Moses, we'll call you Mosaic. And some people love Jesus. And if you follow Jesus, we'll call you Christian. And there's some people who call themselves Christians, but they're actually Mosaic. Yes. Because you look at what they do. That's why there's a saying, you preach water and drink wine. It means that that's your system. The Pharisees were people who preach water and drink wine. Yeah, that's them. That's them. That's how they do their thing. You should go and study Jewish people. Very interesting. They are so diverse. Jews are diverse. Beautiful. And strange. And sad at the same time. You know, have you seen a situation that evokes very many emotions at the same time? Have you ever seen a painting? You know, you look at a painting and you feel sad, but then you feel happy. And then you feel weird. And then you want to shed tears and want to cry. That's now what the Jewish nation is like. Because there were some people, for them to keep the law, they did the opposite. I don't want to spiel a lot. You gotta do your research. I've done mine. I've done my research. So you go and read them. Go and find out which type of Jews were those. When they say A, they did Z, and that was law. And those were lawyers. And then, so what does this mean? The lawyers who do A, who say A and do Z, will fight the lawyers who do A and who say A and do A. Yeah, that's how it is. But it's a secret. And you know, it's mixed up. So what am I trying to say? Jesus was also a lawyer. And he gave his laws. But his laws were more graceful. If you read them in English detailed, he doesn't say thou shalt like Moses. He says be, do, be, do. And then he even says a very beautiful statement. I'm so sorry, this is supposed to be God is still speaking. So we've got to stop here. Let's conclude and say God is everywhere. What it means is that God is everywhere. Yes. Whether you go anywhere, what does that mean? It's not about the person. You see, it's not about the person. It's about Him. It's not about the place. It's about Him. And if you go to a place because you're looking for God, you'll get Him. You will. Just go. You'll get Him. You will. But if you go to a place and you feel you won't get God from there, don't go. Because it's like working. And we're going to talk about this in our other channels and stuff about LGBTQ persons. Do you know many LGBTQ persons are working in homophobic workspaces? Yes, they do. And another thing, if you are LGBTQ and you are out, 80% you don't have a job. It's that simple. Why? You're LGBTQ. That is the oppression that happens to LGBTQ persons. just like racial oppression. So LGBTQ persons must understand the world they live in. They have to understand the world they live in is not a world that is so friendly to them. Because imagine if this was an LGBTQ world. Which LGBTQ world is going to live forever? I mean, which LGBTQ person was going to suffer? Absolutely none. Do you know why most LGBTQ people suffer? They live in homophobe land, in homophobe zones, where homophobia is high. So it's a fact, you're LGBTQ, 80% you're going to suffer. Because you are living in a homophobic environment. There is no way cattle can sleep with lions. It's a given. They'll be done. They'll be destroyed. That's why we have education systems to teach people to live with everybody. Because identity is diverse. Identity is diverse. There's religious diversity. There's sexual diversity. That's where the world is right now. And we are transitioning. You know, we never knew diversity very well. And it wasn't that it wasn't there. It was there. Even in the Bible. Paul says it's one spirit, but diverse operations. He does not even number the operations. He just says diverse. The word used is the King James Bible, which is 400 years old. 400 years old. And the word used is diverse. That means the word diverse is as old. It's that old. But guess what? Despite it being old, people didn't even know its importance. Biodiversity is a 20th century word. Why? Because as the scientists started studying, they got to know, oh my, things are different. We thought everything is the same. We thought all the cows are the same. I mean, for crying out loud, not all cows are black and white. That's enough for you to know that things are diverse. You don't even need to read a book to tell you that there's differences. By golly, some people are short and some are tall. You don't need a book to tell you that that's diversity. But sometimes, because of human nature, we ignore diversity because it's so natural. You know, natural things are forgotten. We don't put them in memory because we know them. We know, they're different, but we need to reinforce that understanding, because like religious diversity is so hard for people to understand. Why? Why is religious diversity hard for people? Because religion is a personal, we're going to study religion in depth, you know. And what I know, it is such a deep thing that shapes your worldview. You know, when you have a worldview, when you see a different worldview, your first reaction is that worldview is bad. Your second reaction is whoever keeps that worldview will not be my friend. That's how worldviews are. So friends, we got to end there. God is still speaking. God is everywhere. And what that means is the person of God, the being of God can be found even in your room. You can have a service with God. You can have communion. That's why we have a personal relationship with God. In the sanctums, anywhere, in the lake, in the mountain, in the cloud, in the bar. Yes, God can commune with you. He can walk in anywhere. So if he can walk in anywhere, then he can go anywhere. And he can be everywhere. You can see God in a beggar. You can see God in a rich man. You can see God in every person. That's why Paul said it well. God is in all and is for all.